September 11th, it conjures clear images, the Twin Towers collapsing, the Pentagon burning, and the quiet fields of Pennsylvania where Flight 93 came down. For most of us, these images stand for a single day of horror that reshaped American politics, security, and culture. But what if the day had been far worse? Not just in the tally of lives lost, but in the scope of targets, the nature of weapons used, or the political chain reaction that followed. A darker day, expanded attacks, and alternate plots. Imagine an attack plan that goes beyond hijacked airliners and a few high-profile targets. In the years before 2001, authorities uncovered plots like the Bojinka Plan, which envisioned coordinated airliner attacks across multiple cities. Taking that kernel and enlarging it, an alternate scenario might include a wave of aircraft deliberately crashed into urban centers beyond New York and Washington, simultaneous strikes on critical infrastructure such as regional power plants and major bridges, and localized incidents intended to sow chaos in transportation hubs. The logistical challenge of synchronizing dozens of assaults would be immense, but planners with insider knowledge of flight schedules, airport security gaps, and regional vulnerabilities could, in theory, design a highly disruptive campaign. The immediate human cost would be catastrophic. The cascading failure of transit, emergency response, and medical services would multiply casualties far beyond the initial impacts. A second layer to this escalation could involve attacks designed to damage the electrical grid and communications backbone rather than create spectacular, visible destruction. Small, targeted strikes on key substations or transformers can have outsized effects because replacing critical electrical equipment is time-consuming and supply chain dependent. In a world where multiple substations across several states are damaged in a coordinated window, entire metropolitan areas could face prolonged outages. The secondary impacts, loss of potable water, failure of traffic control systems, stalled hospital capacity when generators run out of fuel, would transform a single-day disaster into a week or month-long humanitarian crisis. The idea of using electromagnetic disruptions or simulated radiation events crops up in alternate histories and conspiracy fiction. While directed energy weapons capable of producing wide-area EMP effects remain in the realm of scientific speculation, low-tech methods like timed blasts, incendiary devices, and the use of simple explosives in critical locations have historically shown they can create outsized social and economic harm. In our scenario, combining physical strikes with attacks intended to appear as an EMP or radiation release would complicate forensic analysis and create public confusion about the nature of the threat. When the scale of violence grows, so does the potential for deception or manipulation. Historical documents such as Operation Northwoods, a declassified plan that proposed false flag actions to justify foreign intervention, demonstrate that planners have sometimes considered extreme measures in the service of geopolitical aims. The presence of such plans in archival records doesn't mean they were carried out, but they do provide templates for how governments and contractors might think about using crises to advance broader agendas. Targeting government, continuity, power, and the vacuum left behind.
The firefighting capabilities, when you get up to this high level, I assume the firefighters have got to get up there and, fight it from inside. If you're taking a look now, you can see that we've just had another explosion, and that is considerably lower. And is that in the other building? Is that what I'm witnessing?
One of the most consequential possibilities in a much worse 9/11 would be a direct hit to the structures of government. The U.S. continuity of government doctrine exists precisely to prepare for scenarios in which national leadership is incapacitated. If multiple branches of government, major courts, and a significant portion of the congressional leadership were suddenly unable to function, the country would enter an emergency constitutional environment. That vacuum could enable a rapid concentration of executive authority under acting officials or trigger arrangements where regional authorities and emergency commissions assume wide discretionary powers. Continuity plans are meant to preserve governance, but in a large-scale crisis, the line between temporary authority and long-term structural change can blur fast. The question of who assumes power and how they wield it is central to this section. In our alternate history, a combination of pre-positioned contingency centers, rapid evacuations of selected leaders, and the practical need to issue immediate orders creates a small cohort of decision-makers operating with extraordinary latitude. These people might lean heavily on private contractors for logistics, security, and reconstruction, elevating companies with pre-existing ties to the federal government. One plausible avenue for the influence through private military companies and expanded enforcement contracts. The early 2000s already saw increased use of private security firms in conflict zones. In a scenario where domestic order is fragile and conventional forces are redeployed overseas, reliance on private contractors for guarding critical sites or conducting security sweeps could become widespread. These contractors would operate in legal gray zones, subject to different oversight than uniformed forces. And the social effect of armed private entities performing quasi-governmental roles inside the U.S. would be profound. Attribution, intelligence, and the rush to blame. Assigning responsibility after a massive attack is as much a political process as a scientific one. The standard intelligence cycle, collect, process, analyze, disseminate, relies on intact communication, functioning labs, and freedom of movement. In our worst 9/11 timeline, key forensic capabilities might be compromised at the moment they're needed most. Fragmented evidence, destroyed archives, and overwhelmed labs create an environment where provisional intelligence assessments gain outsized influence. Politicians and the public often crave simple narratives in moments of trauma, and that pressure can push agencies to favor decisive but potentially premature attributions. Historical examples offer cautionary lessons. The public narrative around any complex international event rarely follows neatly from open source facts alone. It's shaped by classified intelligence, interagency politics, and strategic interests. If the immediate intelligence picture points ambiguously towards certain state or non-state actors, political leaders may announce attributions that align with broader strategic aims or domestic messaging. Once a major power has been publicly blamed, the diplomatic and military machinery tends to mobilize rapidly, sometimes with limited opportunity for deeper review. Life after. Civil liberties, surveillance, and everyday control.
They're constantly lying to us. And there's no regard to the Constitution at all. Now, the Patriot Act, for me, it's kind of weird because I'm a New Yorker. I was there for 9/11. And it's very emotional for New Yorkers that were there still very emotional. I had a friend who was a fireman there as part of cleanup, and he was a broken man after that.
And after 2001, the Patriot Act passed a week after 9/11. 9/11 happens. 1 week later, there's an anthrax attack on our government. And at that point, Patrick Leahy and a couple of other senators were fighting the Patriot Act and saying, you can't do this. This is an attack on American constitutional democracy.
A catastrophic spike in violence changes what populations are willing to accept in the name of security. Policies adopted in response to mass casualty events often broaden surveillance authorities, expand data collection, and normalize permanent policing measures. The Patriot Act of our timeline, passed in the wake of the 2001 attacks, exemplifies how emergency legislation can permanently reshape legal boundaries around privacy and due process. If the scale of attack is larger and the variety of threats more diffuse, then the legislative and regulatory response could be more sweeping. In our alternate timeline, surveillance infrastructures accelerate, governments invest heavily in sensor networks, mass data aggregation, and public-private partnerships that link telecommunications, finance, and transportation data to national security apparatuses. These investments are justified as necessary to prevent future catastrophes, and the public, reeling from heightened perceived danger, may accept trade-offs in civil liberties, particularly if media narratives frame opposing dissent as unpatriotic or dangerous. The normalization of warrantless data searches, extended detention without the usual procedural safeguards, and the delegating of enforcement to private contractors produce social shifts where ordinary citizens feel both watched and less protected by traditional checks and balances. Global aftershocks.
I take the threat very seriously. I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously.
An attack of enlarged scale reshapes not only domestic politics, but global alignments. If attribution points to a state sponsor, or even to a proxy group with state ties, the international response could range from targeted strikes to wide-ranging sanctions or invasions. The diplomatic fallout would be framed by pre-existing rivalries, regional balances of power, and the readiness of allies to participate. A rush to war against perceived sponsors could redraw the map of alliances, accelerating intervention in regions already tense and provoking unexpected responses from other great powers. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think a wider, more destructive version of September 11th would have produced stronger unity and quicker recovery, or would it have accelerated fragmentation and privatization of power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.